Takasugi Shinsaku. Takasugi Shinsaku Gao Shen Jin Zuo, 27 September 1839, 17 May 1867, was a samurai from the Chōshū Domain of Japan who contributed significantly to the Meiji Restoration. He used several alias to hide his activities from the Tokugawa shogunate. Early life. Takasugi Shinsaku was born in the castle town Hagi, the capital of the Chōshū Domain, present-day Yamaguchi Prefecture, as the first son of Takasugi Kachuta, a middle-ranked samurai of the domain, and his mother Michai Dao. He would have three younger sisters by the name of Tomo Jai, Sachai Xing, and Mei Ming. He had smallpox at the age of 10, but fortunately he had recovered from it. Takasugi joined the Shokusanjuku, the famous private school of Yasuda Shoin. Takasugi devoted himself to the modernization of Chōshū's military and became a favorite student of Yasuda. In 1858, he entered the Shoheiko, a military school under direct control of the shogun at Edo. When his teacher was arrested during the Ansei Purge in 1859, Takasugi visited him in jail. Shoin was later executed in 21 November 1859. In December 1859, he returned home by the clan's command. In January 1860, Takasugi married Inao Masa, the second daughter of Yamaguchi retainer and magistrate Inao Heimin, who was also the friend of his father. Masa was said to be the most beautiful lady in Suo and Nagato provinces. Their marriage was arranged by his parents, with hope that he would take his mind off of his teacher's death in 1859 and to settle down with his new bride. However, in April 1861, Takasugi would left his home and undertook naval training on the clan's warship Haishin Maru and traveled to Edo. Later in September, he went to study at the Tohoku region, and there he was associated with Sakuma Shozen and Yakoi Shonen. Foreign experience. Takasugi, in spite of his young age, was an influential factor within Chōshū, as one of the most extreme advocates of a policy of seclusion and expelling the foreigners from Japan. Takasugi was implicated in the 31 January 1863 attack on the British legation in Edo. In spite of Japan's policy of national isolation in the Edo period, in 1862 Takasugi was ordered by the domain to go secretly to Shanghai in China to investigate the state of affairs and the strength of the Western powers. Takasugi's visit coincided with the Taiping Rebellion, and he was shocked by the effects of European imperialism even on the Chinese Empire. Takasugi returned to Japan convinced that Japan must strengthen itself to avoid being colonized by the Western powers, or to suffer a similar fate as China. This coincided with the growing Sano-Joi expel the barbarians and revere the emperor movement, which attracted certain radical sections of Japan's warrior class and court nobility, and Takasugi's ideas found ready support in Chōshū and other parts of Japan. Formation of the Shatai and Kiheitai. Takasugi originated the revolutionary idea of auxiliary irregular militia Shatai. Under the feudal system, only the samurai class was allowed to own weapons. Takasugi promoted the recruitment of commoners into new, socially mixed paramilitary units. In these units, neither recruitment nor promotion depended, at least in theory, on social status. Farmers, merchants, carpenters, and even sumo wrestlers and Buddhist priests were enlisted, although samurai still formed the majority in most of the Shatai. Takasugi clearly saw that utilization of the financial wealth of the middle-class merchants and farmers could increase the military strength of the domain without weakening its finances. Since the leaders of Chōshū were unable and unwilling to change the social structure of the domain, limited use of peasants and commoners enabled them to form a new type of military without disturbing the traditional society. In 1863, Takasugi himself founded a special Shatai unit under his direct command called the Kiheitai, which consisted of 300 soldiers, about half of whom were samurai. However, due to his propagation of Sano-Joi ideology, Takasugi was imprisoned by the domain's authorities after an anti-Chōshū coup in Kyoto in the summer of 1863 threatened to jeopardize Chōshū's leading role in national politics. External and internal crisis. However, Chōshū soon had no choice but to call on Takasugi again. After Chōshū fired upon Western warships in the Straits of Shimonoseki on 25 June 1863, British, French, Dutch, and American naval forces bombarded Shimonoseki, the main port of the Chōshū Domain, the following summer in what was later called the bombardment of Shimonoseki. This was followed by the landing of French Marines. Their fighting against Chōshū units demonstrated the inferiority of traditional Japanese troops against a Western army, and convinced the leaders of the domain of the absolute necessity for a thorough military reform. The Chōshū Domain's administration called on Takasugi not only to carry out this reform as Director of Military Affairs, but he, only 25 years of age, was also entrusted with negotiating peace with the four Western powers. In view of the humiliation of Chōshū forces against the Western powers, Takasugi had come to the realization that direct confrontation with the foreigners was not an option. Instead, Japan had to learn military tactics, techniques, and technologies from the West. Takasugi reorganized his Kiheitai militia into a rifle unit with the latest modern rifles, and introduced training in Western strategy and tactics. Moreover, Takasugi used his influence with the Sano-Joi movement to promote a more conciliatory policy towards the West, and thus the movement to expel the barbarians and revere the emperor evolved into an anti-Bakufu movement, with the overthrow of the Tokugawa Bakufu as a necessary means to strengthen Japan against the foreigners. Weakened by the punitive attack by the Western powers, Chōshū was unable to withstand an expedition mounted by the Bakufu in autumn 1864 in retaliation for previous Chōshū attempts to seize control of Kyoto. At first, conservative forces, which favored conciliation with the Bakufu in order to secure the domain, were dominant in Chōshū politics, and Takasugi and some of his compatriots had to leave the domain to avoid renewed imprisonment. Takasugi, with only about a dozen followers, including future political leaders Yamagata Aritomo, Ito Hirobumi, and Inao Kaoru, gathered in Kokura in Kyushu and prepared an attack on the conservative forces in Chōshū. The subsequent Chōshū Civil War began on 13 January 1865. Takasugi played a major role in this civil war, and his Kiheitai militia proved its superiority over old-fashioned samurai forces. With a series of quick strikes and the support of Katsura Kagoro, Takasugi achieved victory by March 1865. He became one of the main arbiters of the Chōshū Domain's policy, and continued to act as the domain's expert on Western military science, devoting his efforts to importing arms and raising troops. These reforms proved to be successful when Chōshū was victorious on four fronts against the Bakufu's second Chōshū expedition in 1866, with the Kiheitai itself securing victory on two fronts. Takasugi's efforts had made a small-scale nation in arms out of Chōshū, giving it a military strength out of proportion to its relatively small size. With its victory over the Tokugawa forces, the military power of the Bakufu was discredited, and traditionally rival domains decided to join forces with Chōshū in the subsequent battles, which led to the Meiji Restoration and the end of the Tokugawa Bakufu. Death. Takasugi did not live to see this success. He died of tuberculosis in the residence of the bar manager Hayashi Senkuro at Shimonoseki on 17 May 1867, while under the care of his former mistress Ouno and his wife Masa. His Kiheitai was taken over by his protege Yamagata Aritomo. Only a year later, Takasugi's dream of overthrowing the Tokugawa shogunate, which found obvious manifestation in his alternate name Tajio Go to the east, was fulfilled with the Meiji Restoration. Kiheitai was disbanded in 1868. The success of the socially mixed unit and its Western armaments and tactics was an important influence on the development of the Imperial Japanese Army and on the later system of universal military conscription in Japan. Legacy. Takasugi Shinsaku, central figure of the early Meiji Restoration, is as well known for his military talents as he is for his skills as a politician. However, dying at the young age of 28, Takasugi was not to become one of Japan's famous leaders in the subsequent Meiji era. In his hometown, the castle town Hagi, Yamaguchi in southwestern Japan, he is still remembered as a mystical and energetic hero who put all his efforts into opening the way to modernization, westernization, and reforms, not only in military matters but in political and social matters as well. Court rank. Shashi Cy, Senior 4th rank. Gallery of Birthplace of Takasugi Shinsaku. Takasugi Shinsaku in media. Takasugi is a secondary character present in the manga and anime Rurouni Kenshin, as well as its OAV adaptation Trust and Betrayal, shown to be in the last stages of his illness. He recruited the young Himura Kenshin into the Kiheitai before allowing Chōshū leader Katsura Kogoro to make him the Hitakiri Batasai. While portrayed as a brash and ruthless warrior, he is nonetheless wary of his unsavory actions and tried to dissuade Katsura from corrupting Kenshin's soul to no avail. His Japanese voice actor is Wataru Takagi, and his English voice actor is Jason Phelps. Takasugi was the inspiration for Takasugi Shinsaku, one of the main and earliest antagonists in the manga series Gintama. A highly fictionalized version of Takasugi appears in the PSP game Bakumatsu Rock and its anime adaptation. In the game, which is set in the Bakumatsu and has a musical theme, he is depicted as the bass player in a rock band led by Sakamoto Ryoma. Takasugi Shinsaku is usually portrayed in most NHK Taiga drama dealing with the Meiji Restoration. Most recent instances would be Ryamaden, played by Japanese actor Yusuke Isia. Hanamoyu, played by Japanese actor Kengo Kora. Takasugi Shinsaku was played by Japanese actor Yujiro Ishihara in the 1957 film Sun in the Last Days of the Shogunate. Takasugi Shinsaku is credited with the aphorism Live a Pleasant Life in the Unpleasant World in the manga Natsuyuki Rendezvous. Takasugi Shinsaku is the protagonist in the anime Bakumatsu. His Japanese voice actor is Nakamura Yuyuichi.